have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast.
Hello and welcome back to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. This is episode 142, and joining me as always, Major Caldwell, Tara Roberts, and we are presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. Head to fantasypoints.com today, enter promo code VIPERS22, you get 10% off that subscription. Now joining us today, we have one of the Footballguys Staff members joining us. You may also know him from the Auction Brief podcast. He is the foremost expert when it comes to auction drafts, and he is a two-time Kings Classic auction champion. He is the one and only Drew Davenport. How you doing, Drew?
Fantastic. That's quite an introduction. Thank you, Matt. It's nice to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Glad to have you. We got the Kings Classic just coming up around the corner here, like in, 4 days, whatever that looks like. Can you believe we're already in August? The Hall of Fame game has already come and gone. We are officially out of week 0 and moving into week 1 of the preseason. That is where we are. For me right now, it seems like football just kind of left, and now we are right back at it. Are you excited? I mean, look at your background there. You got 5 different screens going on, so you must be ready for the season to kick off.
Sunday afternoons from 1 to 7 with the Sunday ticket and this TV wall is pretty sublime. Yeah, I'm excited. I can't even believe it either because, you start the content grind in, May, sometimes even earlier than that, and you blink and here we are. But at some point, I think I need to actually prepare for the Kings Classic draft. I'm doing all this work for the expo and the panel and the poker tournament. I haven't actually done any work for the draft, so I might need to start that.
I always get a kick of that because I keep giving Bob Lung all these different ideas. Hey, you know what we should do? We should have like a little mini Olympics to determine the draft order for these drafts and this and that. He's like, I've already got my hands full. What more do you want? I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, you're in that same boat. I mean, picking up a couple different things there. We got the poker tournament, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I'm sure. But a lot of people don't quite realize, and maybe they do, because hey, the podcast itself is basically tells you the auction brief podcast, auction draft, the brief, kind of maybe a little bit of a hint at what your professional life is. Talk about that lawyer kind of background. So we're going to talk about some legal situations here. We're going to talk about some auction stuff, and we're going to kick it off with these legal things, guys. We got to talk about a former Clemson Tiger here right off the get-go. I know we don't want to, but I could talk about him. Major could talk about him. Tara could talk about him, but none of us is really qualified to break this all down maybe the way you are. So can you kind of give fantasy managers a little bit of a insight on what to expect this season? Because I know right now, if we go back to our SFB 12 league right now, and you and I drafted together in that Metropolitan division there, or the Metropolis, or whatever you want to call it, you took a couple of legal swings at some guys here, including DeShaun Watson in your draft. So how are you putting yourself at ease with the whole DeShaun Watson situation?
Well, at ease is probably not how I'm feeling about it. But, I'm taking some swings on those guys in bigger tournaments and bigger situations. Scott Fishbowl has turned into a huge field in the last couple of years, and I think that's fantastic for the inclusion, and I totally support Scott's decision on that. But it's become a bit more of a minefield. You just kind of got to walk through the safe spots. And I think that Kamara, where I got him, was in the 4th round maybe, and then I ended up getting Watson in maybe the 13th or 14th, something like that. I'm taking those shots because I do think that, and we can talk more details about Kamara, but I think that there is a chance that both of them see the field for the second half of the year. And if that's the case, that's going to be huge. But in regular redraft formats, I'm being a lot more cautious with the two of them.
So Sue Robinson kind of brought down her verdict, so to speak, there on the 6-game suspension. We also know that the NFL, because of the collective, the CBA there has a little bit of say one way or the other. Do they really have a say when it's all said and done? Because I know there's some really interesting language in that whole thing.
Yeah. So this is turned into one heck of a situation. And it's interesting to me because I think that the whole point of the process that they put in the CBA in the first place was to avoid the circus. And here we are the first time we're using it. So that's odd to me. But, at this point, what I keep saying about Robinson's decision is that she really put together. I mean, would you expect any less? A former federal judge. She really nailed down all the corners of this case and said, I know what you're going to say, and here's my answer. And I know what you're going to say about this, and here's my answer. So she did a really nice job of laying out, like, this is why I'm at where I'm at. So I don't know what's going to happen on this appeal. My guess is that they are going to up the suspension, but I'm really interested to hear the rationale for how they do it. Because like I said, I think Robinson's ideas were really buttoned up, and I want to hear how they find an exception to that and decide that there needs to be more punishment. I'm fairly certain that's coming, but I want to hear the justification when it does.
Well, the good news is if you're a Cleveland Browns fan or a DeShaun Watson fan for whatever reason, good thing is he wasn't caught with weed or he'd be suspended for the next 2 seasons. Now, when we talk about some of these other guys here, like Alvin Kamara, we've heard from 6, 8, 10 games at one point down to possibly not even being suspended for the 2022 season because of the way this keeps getting pushed back. What are your thoughts on the Alvin Kamara situation?
Yeah, the legal timeline is really kind of setting up exactly like I thought. It might even be going a little bit slower than I thought, because back in April, I had a feeling or I had a thought to myself, well, maybe this will be over before the season. But then they gave him that continuance back in April that went all the way to August. And I thought, no way, this is now setting up for this to push out past the 23 or the 22 season into early 23. I think that the reason I keep saying that is because these parties are both in a very difficult situation. They're painted kind of into a corner about what they can do, because the prosecutor has trouble offering a nice deal to these defendants when there's such egregious injuries involved. And then on the other side, Kamara's going to find it hard to really say, hey, I can take that deal if it's going to immediately suspend him or if it's going to be a serious violation of the personal conduct policy. Also, keep in mind that the charge that he has right now, the most serious one, he's got 2, but the most serious one is a felony with mandatory prison time. So this isn't just about, hey, am I going to play football? This is, hey, can I get something that's going to take it out of the mandatory zone and maybe make it something like a misdemeanor type thing. But even if that happens, the personal conduct policy basically starts at 6 games for assaultive type behavior. So this is a really sticky situation, and that's why I say it's gonna push out. But I have 2 caveats to that. I really do believe in the legal timeline, but there are 2 things that can get in the way. Number one is if that video at some point leaks or is released, it may force the NFL's hand on the exempt list, because it sounds like it's a pretty heinous video. We don't know that. We've only heard that second and third hand. And the second caveat I offer is if at some point during the season, Kamara gets a deal that he feels like he can't pass up, it's possible that he's going to say, all right, I have to take this deal. And even more possible if the Saints are sitting there at, like, say, 5-8 or something, and he says, we're done for the year. I'm going to take this deal, and I'm going to get the suspension going now. And that could negatively impact fantasy drafters in the worst possible way at the end of the season. So it's still a volatile pick.
So from a dynasty perspective, let's say you're a contender, dynasty league, you've got Kamara. You're kind of in a tight situation. If it were you, would you be looking to mid-season? Because at this point, like you were saying, provided nothing gets leaked, he's going to be playing through the majority of the season. Are you looking maybe midway through the season to make a deal and try to sell him off? Or are you going to ride him out as a contender and just try to get what you can out of this year?
I think I'd be looking for an opportunity. And I think that September 29th is going to tell us a lot. There's an attorney who dropped onto my timeline saying that he has some information. There's a lot of people on Twitter like that. But what he said made a whole lot of sense, is that he thinks that there will be maybe possibly a misdemeanor offer coming to Kamara instead of the felony. And so I think we might know more about that on the 29th. And that's unfortunately, that's into the season and we've already drafted. I get that. But for Dynasty, for your question, I think on the 29th of September, they're going to tell us which way this is going to go. If they set it for a trial date, you're good in 2022 and it's into 23. But if they say on the 29th, hey, we've been having negotiations, we might have a deal here, you've kind of lost that window. So I'd be looking for a shot, if I'm a contender, to try to get 80 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
And then another one of those players there, Major, you want to talk about there, one of your College of the Canyon players there. Do you want to ask Drew about that?
Yeah, man. Let's talk about Hollywood Brown a little bit, man. Shout out to the College of the Canyon alum. What's going on with Hollywood?
Well, I think it's probably going to be much ado about nothing. That's my opinion out of the gate. I don't know his past traffic record. So that's something that as a defense attorney, I get access to that I won't have access to in this case. But if he doesn't have a history of doing this kind of thing, what I said in a thread about a week ago was that this kind of charge, it's called criminal speeding. So you get this sort of negative connotation that it's criminal. In my jurisdiction, it's called reckless operation of a vehicle. It's really just an elevation of a regular speeding ticket. And that can be for either driving over 85 on a highway, driving more than 20 miles an hour over, or driving over 35 in a school zone. And that's the Arizona law on it. So he can face jail time and license suspension and stuff like that. But that usually does not come into play. That's very unlikely that there's any jail time here. In fact, what most often happens in this situation is that if he doesn't have a past history of this, they reduce the charge to maybe 85 and a 65. So it's right on that 20 mile an hour zone. Maybe they suspend his license a little bit, or maybe they make him go to traffic school or something like that. I really don't believe he's in line for any serious consequences from the law. And I would be surprised if we saw a suspension from the NFL.
And then we got one more there. Tara wants to touch on there. A little bit of a running back there in Minnesota. The old Dalvin Cook situation.
Yes, sorry, the Dalvin Cook situation. Is there anything that we need to worry about with that one?
Yeah, I don't think so. And the reason I say that is because we don't have right now. There's a jury trial date set in April of 23. So going into early May, a 10-day trial date. So I don't know that anything's going to happen this season. And on top of that, this is a really nasty back and forth situation that I'm not sure the NFL wants to step in the middle of. They haven't shown a propensity for wanting to punish people with civil charges. I know we're looking at the Watson case a little differently, but in the past, that hasn't happened very much. I mean, Antonio Brown had a lot of allegations against him civilly, and then he got the 8-game suspension because he pled guilty to a felony. So I don't know that the NFL wants to step in here. As soon as this suit was filed, Dalvin Cook's team pushed back immediately and said, no, Cook has been the victim of abuse. This sounds like it's setting up to be a pretty nasty fight, pretty prolonged fight. I don't know that we're in any danger in 2022. I'd be surprised if there was any suspension. That's the guy I'm least concerned about here. Well, him and Brown both. I'm not very concerned about 22 at all.
Well, that's great. So I'll put you on the spot here. Dynasty startup, Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara?
You are putting me on the spot. I think I'd lean Cook. I think I'd lean Cook there.
All right. So how much would you bid on Dalvin Cook? What are we looking at with Dalvin Cook's here in 2022? Because we're going to move on to auction drafts here right now. Perhaps one of the most exciting yet frustrating type of fantasy football things out there. First off, why even bother doing auction drafts? Like, what is the major appeal? Because I find this to be the absolute yin and yang going on in my head. The ultimate battle for my mind here. I hate losing anything. That includes a bid, but I'm also cheap. I am incredibly frugal. I'm one of those frugal bidders here as well. And yet somehow, some way, I ended up paying $14 for Sterling Shepard last year in the Kings Classic. So tell me, why should I do auction drafts?
Matt, you should have stopped bidding. You would have stuck me with him for $11. And
He doesn't know the word.
Well, in his defense and in my defense, he was one of the last players on the board that we cared about. But yeah, well, I tell you what, I would say this about auction drafting. I say it all the time. If you feel like you have an edge in fantasy football in general, and I'm assuming the four of us here are more prepared than 99% of the casual players out there, or all the players out there. If you feel like you have an edge, then auctions are for you, because that is where you can push the edge to a higher level. And I feel like when you get into a snake draft, you're really pigeonholed on which set of guys you can take at certain spots in the draft. And auctions don't have that. And my builds are much more unique in auction drafts that allows me to sort of emphasize what I want to emphasize. And so again, if you think you have an edge there, auctions are the way to push that edge.
It feels like snake drafts have more of that confirmation bias, right? It seems like when you go into a snake draft, it's more of a consensus type feel to those drafts. And depending on where guys are kind of go, you may get some value here and there. But I mean, like you said, that auction, it's kind of the great equalizer when it comes to drafting.
Yeah, sorry about that. Mid-sip. Yeah, it is. And that's what I keep talking about with people. I say, hey, you don't want to walk into the draft and be like, oh, I got pick number 6. I hate the 6 hole this year. Like it really stuffs you into a position that maybe you don't want to be in. And I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting there in the 5th round and I'm like, well, I never wanted to draft this guy, but he's fallen 2 rounds. I got to take him. And he does nothing. And I'm like, see, this is why I didn't want to take him, so you don't have to worry about it, that when you're in an auction. And I think that's underrated. I think the fun, the competition, the amount of engagement that you have during the draft is just on a different level, because you have to pay attention to every single thing that's happening, as opposed to, hey, I can check out for 15 minutes and come back when it's 3 picks before me and decide what I want to do. You're engaged the whole time. It's like a sweaty mess. And then you get done and you're like, oh, that was so much fun.
Speaking of engagement, when do you start? Do you try to get a feel for the room when you're starting an auction draft? Do you try and do any planning ahead of time? What kind of prep do you do prior to the draft?
That is a huge hole that I could fill in here, but let me try to do it simply. I spend there's the level of preparation that you need is just completely different than in a snake draft. And the analogy that I make is, let's say that somebody has already nominated Leonard Fournette. He's already gone for a certain price. And then Aaron Jones comes up. You have to know not only what you think about Fournette, but also what you think about Aaron Jones. And then what you think about another running back who's right next to them who hasn't been nominated yet. So in the moment, you're really playing Jones off of those 2 other values. And it requires a depth of understanding of your opinion about those guys that you don't have in a snake draft. You really have to be dialed in on that. And so what I try to do is you just make sure you have your tiers. And I know people talk about tiers in snake drafting, but it's so important in auction drafting, because when the tiers start to dry up, the prices start to go up. So you really have to have your tiers and be ready to jump on players before those tiers get dry. Otherwise you get stuck paying more than you should. So, when I get into a draft early on, to your first question, if it's a room that I'm not very familiar with, last year at the Kings Classic was tough. There was a lot of new drafters. Matt was in the room. I hadn't drafted with him before. Mauricio Gutierrez, Ian Hartitz, some of these new guys, I had no clue what they were going to do. So I do like to sit back and wait and just say, okay, how are these guys going to act? How are they going to attack? Sometimes I even might let 3-4 rounds go before I'm super active. Now, you can't let all the elite players be gone, so you might have to get a guy somewhere. But I like to let 3 or 4 rounds go and just watch, and I know exactly what people's tendencies are if I'm paying attention, and then I can attack a little bit better as it goes forward.
Yeah, so give us some of the trick of the trade. Give us like the secret sauce. Do you like nominate guys just to like if somebody else want them, you kind of make the price too high? You play those games?
I do. So there's 2 different ways that you can think about it. I know a lot of people have the opinion that when they start off the draft, they want to just nominate players that they don't want, that are going to be high priced. I think that has its place in an auction, but I don't know that that's how I would start out every auction, because there's 2 reasons why. Number one, you really want to know where you're going with your draft. If you think, hey, I want a top tight end, then I would get that top tight end out there early, because you want to know which way you're going to go. And so I think that's really important. And that's one of those things that I believe is kind of a persistent myth. Somebody says, okay, well, I'm out on, Derrick Henry this year. Then they want to nominate Derrick Henry because somebody's going to spend a bunch of money on him. That's not bad logic, but in reality, think about it. Like, is Derrick Henry really going to last on the board that long? Why do you need to nominate Henry? Somebody's going to do it for you. Nominate something that works for you. Wait for somebody else to nominate Henry. And you can think of it like this. Let's say that Henry's going to go for $50 this year. I don't know if that's right or not, but $45-$50. If somebody gets Henry, you've tied up $50 of their budget. That's correct. But if there are 3 or 4 people in the room who want Henry, you're actually tying up $200, because all those people are thinking about Henry, and you're tying up more cap by leaving him on the board. So I tend to leave players like that on the board that I don't want. And that's early on. It has its place. In the middle part of the draft, I want to be punting my nominations and spending people's money and kind of filling up their roster. So in the middle of the draft, that's when I'm starting to get players out that I don't want. But at the beginning, it's players that I do want. So that's one big thing that I think people miss on in auctions.
Have you ever done that and ended up with that player? You got stuck with a player?
No, well, it's happened, but very rarely because I'm going to really lowball and I'm going to pick somebody that I don't mind getting stuck with. And I'm always going to start with $1. So until you get to the very, very late stages, I almost never get stuck with anybody because I'm going to call out somebody that, I may not be that excited about. I don't know, Elijah Mitchell or somebody and say, all right, $2. And if somebody sticks me with them for $2, they're not going to, but if they do, I'm fine.
Right.
But otherwise, I'm pretty much just going to be like, okay, if you paid $11, that's probably too cheap for Mitchell. But I didn't really want him anyway. It takes up a roster spot. It takes up $11. I'm cool with that. And roster spots tend to have more value as the auction goes on. So I'm trying to fill their rosters in the middle part of the draft.
Let's talk about bidding and players. Are you trying to bid or bid big early, or are you trying to wait later for those discounted players? Are you trying to build your roster with a vast majority of studs and then maybe waiting for some discounted players to fill that in, or are you trying to build out a more even roster overall?
I have a couple different thoughts on that. I think that I like a flatter build when it's a deeper league. So 14, 16 team leagues, I want to go a lot flatter and I want to have more guys on my bench so I can go deeper. But when I'm in 10 team, 12 team auctions, I really want to focus on getting some top players. Now, I've never been one to chase the absolute top at the position. I don't like my builds when I chase Josh Allen or Travis Kelce. Because every summer I have these like hopes and dreams, like this is the year I'm going to get Kelce. It never happens because I go in there and I'm like, I'll pay 26 for Kelce, and then he goes for 34, and I'm like, I don't like my builds when that happens. You have a hole somewhere. I'm not excited about it. So I'm not usually chasing top at the position, but I'm usually chasing, I don't know, in that 4 to 8 range. So like last year, my big target was Austin Eckler because he was a bottom of round 1 guy. And I thought that I could get him for a reasonable price, which turned out to be true, low $40 range for Eckler. And that's kind of what I'm looking at this year. One of those guys is Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon. Those guys, maybe upper 30s, low 40s is realistic. And that's where I'm at for my RB1. I'm not really going to chase, McCaffrey or Taylor. I just don't like how my team sets up when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the question that every like auction player or GM has is, when do you know when to fold it on a particular player? Like, how do you know when to call it quits?
That's really hard, man. It's a lot of finesse. It's one of those situations where you have to look at what you need still and how badly you need the player. The way I always term it is there's a push and pull between need and price. And I'll say it like this. So if you already have your wide receiver 3 and Juju Smith-Schuster comes up and you think, okay, he's a perfect wide receiver 3. Now the bidding stops at, $6. You already have your wide receiver 3, but it's $6. I don't really need that, but $6 is way too cheap. So that's an easy one. That's like, okay, I don't need him, but the price is too good. And then there's the other end of the spectrum. You don't have your wide receiver 2 yet. Juju's the best guy left. And he comes up and he's at 17. That's too much. But you need him so bad that you got to say 18. So there's a little push and pull there between price and need. And the other thing that I like, and this is really the secret sauce. Usually I only talk about this on my show, but I go by something I call a par sheet. And a par sheet is just the actual roster spots written on a piece of paper. And I come up with an exact dollar amount I want to spend on every roster spot. And so I don't use percentages or ranges or anything like that. I put it exactly. RB1, I want to spend 43. Wide receiver 1, I want to spend 36. And I do that for every spot. And the way that helps is not that I'm going to spend that on every spot. What it helps is, okay, well, I wanted to spend 43, but I just spent 41. So I'm going to write like a little +2 out to the side and know that I'm $2 richer now. And then so if that wide receiver bidding gets over the price I wanted to pay, I know I can spend a few extra bucks and maybe even a little bit more because I can pull it from somewhere else. So your par sheet tells you where can I pull it, where can I stick it, whether I'm ahead or behind. That gives you those answers in the heat of the moment when you really need them.
So to that extent, sorry, Matt, I just wanted off of that. So to that extent, if you've got, let's say you're able to get your RB1 and you had, $50 allocated to him and you were able to steal him for 45 mid draft, are you adjusting those $5 to allocate to other particular places?
No, I'm leaving that $5 out. I want it hanging out there because what I want to do is be able to be flexible. And that's why I love getting ahead early in the draft. So if I can see a +5 or a +8 out there, I know that at some point some value is going to come up or a player is going to come up where I'm like, this is the moment. Because a lot of times the way you can use that money is just to make your starting lineup a lot stronger, because you will have already allocated some money to your bench. So I don't typically throw that money at my bench unless I'm in something real deep with a lot of good players, like maybe the Kings Classic, where you can sprinkle that down and have a better roster overall. But more often than not, I like to just leave it hanging out there. And then at some point in the draft, things are going to get scarce. And you're going to have most of your guys, and you're going to think, if I threw that $8 at this guy, my roster is going to take off. And then that's when I usually slam it into one position later in the draft.
So a couple things that I grab on that. First off, I want to set this record straight here on the Sterling Shepard thing. First off, I had like $15 and 2 roster spots left. It was the end of the draft. I mean, it was like, you can't take this money with you, right? So it's like, yeah, let's get rid of it. Unfortunately, it left me with like $1, and I sat there trying to make $1 bids. You can't bid $2. Everyone's nominating for $1. You can't bid on those guys. So you sit there for, I bet you I had to sit there with my one roster spot for like the next probably 45 minutes until I got an opportunity to bid on someone. Second, I'm going to need you to send me that par sheet here before Thursday so that I'm ready. Don't worry, I'm in the Dawson division, so we should be okay here right now. So far.
Oh yeah, okay, then sure, yeah.
Unless something changes here in the next little while.
Confirm that before you send it over.
So I know you're big. You're a big poker kind of guy. Then we've got the river, we've got the flop, we've got all these kind of things. What kind of terminology do we get in auction drafts? Because I just found the pump and dump, and that seems like something I want to try this year.
Well, I tell you what, I'm not the best guy to ask about that. Stars and scrubs is one of the ones that I hear a lot. And yeah, price enforcing or trying to run you up. That's what I hear a lot in my leagues. He was trying to run me up, because you can kind of tell when people are doing it, especially if you're in a live draft room. People kind of get that look like, hey, I know you need this guy real bad, so I'm going to run you up a little bit. So those are a couple examples, but I'm not the best guy to ask about that. I don't think. I don't have anything juicy for you. Sorry.
I think the run up is the pump and dump now, right? Is that
the same thing?
Yeah, you pump it all the way. You push the price up, and then you kind of dump them off on someone else.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. See, I'm not there.
I remember we did that to Kate and Michelle there a couple years ago in the auction draft when we nominated Zach Moss. We got him up there pretty good a couple years ago. But that's neither here nor there. But what I want to talk about is, hey, before we move on to the behind the grind part here, I mean, you got to check out the Auction Brief podcast. I mean, it's one of the best podcasts out there right now, Drew. You do a fantastic job breaking everything down for everybody that's listening. Not to mention, you've got the 2022 mastering series going on there. And I bet you touched on salary caps. I think it was a 7-part series, if I'm not mistaken. It was quite in depth and stuff. So those people who are in those salary cap leagues, I mean, this is something you want to make sure you're getting in on, right?
Well, I appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about that. Yeah, the Auction Brief's a little bit different than any other fantasy podcast. I know everybody thinks that, but I do legal updates and I talk about auction stuff, and then I have a guest on to talk, player evaluations. So I've always said that I'm not the best player evaluator out there. I listen to smarter people than me on that. So I get some guests on and they talk player evaluation, and then I talk legal situations and auction theories. So it's a fun melding together of those things. But the mastering series over on Football Guys is my favorite thing I do all summer. And I completely rewrote it this summer. I feel like it was a little stale after last summer. And so I just completely rewrote it. I think part 5 dropped today. Part 6 is in the queue, and part 7 will be coming up late in the week. But yeah, go over to Football Guys and check that out. I start with basic concepts and talk about beginner strategies and how to attack beginner drafts. And then we get into more concrete stuff like preparing for the draft. And then part 4 is about nomination strategies. Part 5 is about bidding strategies. And part 6 I just turned in is about reading your league and tells on how you can see what people are thinking and what they're about to do. And then part 7 is about inflection points, when the draft changes and you should be all over those inflection points trying to get value in your auction.
Well, I think it's safe to say that when it comes to auction drafts, you are certainly in the top 3, and I don't mean second or third. And hey, when it comes to rankings, I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but hey, I know a thing or two when it comes to rankings, so maybe we can make a little bit of a swap here heading into the Kings Classic. I'll give you my redraft rankings. You help me out with the auction there, a little bit of help each other one way or the other. And the other thing that I want to bring up here before we get on, because we are talking about the expo here, the breakout panel on auctions at the Expo, 1:30 to 2:30, breakout stage. First off, kind of tell people what to expect there. And second, can I just come up there on the stage, just kind of stroke my mustache and look like I know what I'm talking about?
Please don't.
Yeah, you can come up and just sit there and look cool.
Don't say that. Don't. He's gonna do it.
I am in.
Don't say that. You just ruined it.
No, Bob laid down the law. I said, how many can I have? He said,
Security
only
attack.
3. Yeah, only 3 of you, or 3 people and you. So Jody Smith is going to be on there, Scott Pianowski, and Doug Worth. So I think those are 3 auction sharks. I really wanted 3 people that knew what they're doing. Pianowski is one of the best auction drafters I've ever played with. Every time I was getting a deal in the Kings Classic last summer, I hear Scott's ass piping up from the corner of the room, like just bidding me up a couple more dollars. He knew I was getting a deal, and he kept me honest. I bet you he wasted $15 or $20 on my cap in that draft. So yeah, I love having these guys on there. Doug Orth does high stakes auction stuff. So I'm probably going to tell a few funny stories from some auctions in the past, and then we're going to get into some theories about how they attack things and how they do their positional allocations and how they like to do nominations.
All right. So if you want to catch that, make sure you're heading to the Expo right now. But hey, if you can't be at the Expo, that's okay too, because all these breakout sessions are being taped, they're being filmed, they're being recorded, and you'll be able to get those much later on the other site there. So just because you can't make it doesn't mean you can't be part of the Expo here in 2022. With that all being said, hey, I'm Matt, for Major, for Tara, and for Drew. We are out of here, and we're going to come back with Behind the Grind, where we get a little bit more of an in-depth look at one Mr. Drew Davenport. See you in a bit.